They say walls have ears, but in Graceland, the walls had memories. Memories ingrained in the red velvet, hidden beneath the plush white carpet, and locked behind doors most people never saw open. To the world, that mansion on Elvis Presley Boulevard was a castle, the throne of the king of rock. To me, it was just a workplace that smelled of furniture wax mixed with the sweet, cloying odor of spilled grape soda and cigarettes forgotten in ashtrays. I wasn't a hysterical fan screaming at the gate. I wasn't a close friend drinking whiskey in the jungle room. I was Martha. I was the invisible one. I was the ghost who walked through the service door at 4 in the morning when the music stopped and the hangover began. My job was simple: erase the traces. I would clean up the euphoria, the excess, and the mess so that when he woke up in the middle of the afternoon, the world would seem perfect, bright, and untouched again. For years, I fulfilled my role. I saw things that would make newspaper headlines worth millions, but my mouth remained shut, sealed by loyalty and, honestly, by pity. Because what I saw wasn't glamour. I saw banana peels darkening beside the grand piano. I saw stacks of televisions tuned to static channels because silence was the greatest enemy of that house. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that Tuesday in August 1977, just 4 days before the world stopped, 4 days before the legend became immortal and the man disappeared forever. And it was on that hot, humid Memphis morning that Graceland's most sacred rule was broken. I was called to go upstairs. The upstairs was off limits. It was the sanctum sanctorum. Not even the most senior employees went up there unless specifically summoned, and that rarely happened. Upstairs was where Elvis lived, loved, and hid. It was where he stopped being a product and tried to be human. I was in the entrance hall, polishing the stair railing, careful not to step on the first step, when Billy Smith, Elvis's cousin, and one of the few who truly seemed to care about him as a person and not as an ATM, appeared at the top of the stairs. His expression chilled my blood. Billy was pale, with deep, dark circles under his eyes that told the story of sleepless nights, watching over a storm no one knew how to control. He looked around, as if about to commit a crime, and whispered my name. His voice trembled. He said the boss was finally asleep after hours of agitation, but the main bathroom was in a state that neither his daughter, little Lisa Marie, nor the doctor could see. He needed help. He needed discretion. He needed me. Climbing those stairs was like crossing the border of a country at war. The air changed. Downstairs, the house was kept at a pleasant temperature, but upstairs, the cold was polar. Elvis kept the air conditioning on full blast, a desperate attempt to freeze time, or perhaps just to feel something on his skin that wasn't the sweat of the stage or the fever of insomnia. The carpet was so thick it muffled the sound of my cheap shoes. The silence there wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, dense, as if the house were holding its breath. The windows of the master bedroom were sealed with aluminum foil, blocking any trace of the Memphis sun. For him, there was no day or night. There was only the time he was awake and the time he managed, miraculously, to sleep. Entering the master bedroom was a sensory shock. The smell was a chemical and human mixture. Hairspray, expensive perfume, old food, and something else, something clinical, like a hospital corridor disguised as a luxury hotel. The gigantic bed looked like a raft adrift in a sea of darkness, and under the pile of blankets, I saw the outline of the man the world adored. He seemed smaller sleeping, more fragile, but I couldn't stop. Billy pointed me to the bathroom, the famous bathroom, the place where, 4 days later, the story would end. The bathroom was a monument to excess, with gold faucets, velvet armchairs, and mirrors everywhere. But what I saw on the floor wasn't luxury. It was despair. It wasn't ordinary dirt. It was the chaos of someone fighting an internal battle and losing. Towels were scattered like flags of surrender. But what made me stop, what made my heart clench in my chest, were the details. Next to the toilet, where he spent hours seeking refuge, there was a book. It wasn't a gossip magazine. It wasn't a Hollywood script. It was a thick book with a dark cover and a spine worn from constant use. I bent down, driven by a curiosity bordering on sacrilege, and read the title. The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus. That hit me like a physical punch. The man who had everything, who was treated like a living god, was there, locked in the bathroom, reading about how to find the face of God. He wasn't looking for fun. He wasn't looking for pleasure. He was looking for an answer. He was looking for salvation. And the tragedy of that scene was amplified by what was next to the book. There was a row of bottles, not 2 or 3, but dozens. They were small amber plastic soldiers lined up with disturbing military precision. They were sleeping pills, pills to wake up, pills to numb pain, pills to numb sadness. I picked up one of the bottles. The name of the medication was complicated, but the instructions were clear and the date was recent. This wasn't a party. This was a hospital ward. It was the life support system of a man being kept functional by an industry that needed him to be on stage, no matter the cost. I looked in the gilded mirror and saw my own reflection, a simple woman in uniform, holding up proof of the negligence of everyone around him. At that moment, I understood. Elvis wasn't addicted to getting high. He was addicted to trying to stop the pain. The physical pain of a failing body and the emotional pain of a soul that felt profoundly alone, even surrounded by a crowd. Those bottles were the only answer the world had to give him. No one offered him peace. They offered chemicals. I started cleaning, but my hands trembled. I didn't throw the bottles away. I couldn't. They were his property, his crutch. I just organized them. I placed them on a silver tray, lifting them from the cold floor. I carefully closed the holy book and placed it on the marble sink, away from the dampness. It was a small act, perhaps pointless, but I wanted to restore some dignity to that battle scene. As I folded the towels, I heard a sound coming from the dark room, a groan. I stopped, frozen. It wasn't a sound of waking. It was a sound of anguish coming from the depths of sleep. He was suffering even in his dreams. I left the bathroom as quickly and quietly as I could, running down the stairs with my heart in my mouth. When I got downstairs, the contrast was stark. The jungle room was empty, but it seemed to scream with its exotic decorations and heavy furniture. I knew with a nauseating certainty that time was running out. That house wasn't a home. It was a gilded cage, and the bird upstairs was too tired to sing. The following days, Wednesday and Thursday, were a blur of suffocating tension. The atmosphere at Graceland changed. Members of the Memphis Mafia walked the halls with phones pressed to their ears, talking about the upcoming tour, the plane being prepared, the money that needed to come in. They talked about Elvis as if he were a machine that needed a quick fix to get back on track. Nobody talked about the book in the bathroom. Nobody talked about the sadness in his eyes. I cleaned the ashtrays full of expensive cigars and listened to the plans. He'll be fine as soon as he hears the applause, they said. He always gets better. But I had seen the pharmacy on the bathroom floor. I knew that applause wouldn't cure what he had. On Thursday night, the last night, I was in the kitchen helping prepare trays of food that would likely return untouched. Sandwiches, hamburgers, pitchers of ice water. The cook commented that he was in a good mood, that he was playing the piano. I crept into the hallway and listened. The sound of the piano came from afar, muffled by the thick walls. He wasn't playing rock and roll, he was playing gospel. Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, and then old hymns. His voice sounded powerful, but there was a crack in it, a melancholy that made the furniture tremble. He was singing to God, the same God he sought in the book. It was the last time I heard his voice. When I finished my shift on Friday morning, August 16th, the sun was rising red over Memphis. The heat already promised to be unbearable. I looked out the upstairs window before getting into my old car. The silver curtains gleamed. I whispered a silent goodbye, not knowing how definitive it would be. I went home to sleep, trying to erase the image of the lined-up bottles from my mind. But the phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, jolting me from my sleep. It was my sister, yelling at me to turn on the television. The world stopped. The words on the screen seemed unreal, a bad joke. Elvis Presley dies at 42. They spoke of cardiac arrest. They spoke of arrhythmia. Reporters speculated, fans wept at the gates. Chaos took over Elvis Presley Boulevard. But I didn't cry immediately. I felt a chill in my stomach, a sense of inevitability. I knew. I had seen the map of the tragedy drawn on the marble floor 4 days before. His heart didn't stop suddenly. It stopped gradually, worn down by loneliness and overwhelmed by the attempt to numb a life that had become too big to live. I was called back to Graceland that same night. The house was transformed. It was no longer the silent sanctuary. It was the epicenter of a global earthquake. There were people everywhere. Family, friends, doctors, lawyers, and vultures disguised as mourners. I was ordered to clean again. They needed to prepare the house for the funeral, for the public wake that would bring thousands of people into that violated intimacy. I went upstairs once more. The body had already been taken to the morgue. The room was strangely empty without his magnetic presence. I went into the bathroom, and that's when the anger hit me. It was clean, impeccable. Someone had gotten there before me. The bottles were gone. The book, The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus, was gone. The scene had been sanitized. History was being rewritten in real time. They were erasing the pain, erasing the evidence of human struggle to leave only the legend intact. They wanted the world to remember the king, not the vulnerable man who needed pills to face the day and theological books to face the night. I felt complicit in that lie, just for being there with a cloth in my hand, polishing the mirror that had witnessed everything. While cleaning the rest of the suite, I found something they had overlooked. Perhaps because it was too small, too insignificant for the eyes of those who only saw dollar signs and legacies. Near a reading armchair, fallen and half hidden under the fringe of the carpet, was a piece of paper. It was Hilton Hotel letterhead, crumpled, as if it had been squeezed in anger or frustration. I picked it up and smoothed it in the palm of my hand. The handwriting was his, unmistakable, with those hurried scribbles. It wasn't a song lyric for an album. It wasn't a note to his girlfriend. They were loose phrases, disconnected thoughts from a restless mind. "There's nobody here," the first line read. And further down, "I need to find my way back to the light." And finally, just one word crossed out several times: peace. I looked at that piece of paper and felt the tears finally welling up. That wasn't the king of rock. That was a boy lost in the dark, crying for help. I kept the paper in my uniform pocket deep down where nobody could see it. I didn't give it to his family. I didn't sell it to the tabloids that would offer a fortune for any last word from Elvis. That paper was proof of his humanity, and I knew the world wouldn't be kind to that weakness. The world wanted the idol in overalls, not the broken man. The funeral was a blur of tearful faces and excessive flowers. The scent of roses and lilies was so strong it masked the smell of the house. But I could still feel, deep down, the scent of loneliness. I watched the white coffin descend the staircase, the same staircase I breathed every day. People wept for the loss of voices, the movement of hips, the songs. I wept for the man who tried to heal himself alone in the bathroom and failed. I continued working at Graceland for some time while the house was being prepared to become a museum. The transformation was painful to watch. Velvet ropes were installed to keep tourists away from the furniture. The carpets were protected with plastic. Life was drained from the place, replaced by a sterile preservation. I saw the guides rehearsing their texts, talking about the gold records, the films, the awards. They never mentioned the book about Jesus. They never mentioned the pharmacy on the floor. The official story was cemented, a tragic, perhaps inevitable heart attack of a man who lived intensely. I left Graceland before they opened the gates to the public. I couldn't bear to see strangers walking through the corridors where I had seen real ghosts. I took my memories with me, and that crumpled piece of paper. Today, years later, when I see images of him on television, young and vibrant or even bloated and sweaty at his last shows, I don't see the myth. I see the man in the bathroom. I see the search. People ask, how did he die? They want sordid details. They want to know the exact mixture of drugs. They want the autopsy report. But the truth I carry is different. Elvis didn't simply die because his heart stopped beating on the afternoon of August 16th. He began to die long before, in that cold isolation upstairs. He died of a hunger that no food could satisfy, and a thirst that no drink could quench. He died because he was surrounded by people, but he was completely, utterly alone. What I found 4 days before he died destroyed me because it showed me that absolute success can be the loneliest prison in the world. Those bottles weren't for fun, they were the bars of his cell. And the book was his attempt to dig a tunnel out towards something bigger, something that made sense. I'd like to believe that in that last moment, when he fell to the bathroom floor that I cleaned so carefully, he didn't find darkness. I like to believe that he found the face he was looking for in the book. Today, I am just an elderly woman with a story few would believe. But sometimes I pull that yellowed page from my Bible. The blue ink is fading, but the word peace is still legible. It's my secret. Proof that the king wasn't a god, but a man who, until the very last second, tried to save himself. And perhaps, just perhaps, by sharing this now, I can finally erase the last trace I left behind. The weight of having been the only one to see the truth and not being able to do anything but clean up the mess. Graceland now belongs to the world, but that moment in the bathroom, the silence, the book, and the pain, that belongs to me. And now, it belongs to you.